Get into other news now. Law firm Herbert Smith Freehills says there is a need for a declaratory court order on the constitutionality of workplace mandatory vaccination policies. This in order to encourage businesses to introduce them. The law firm says this will help in getting more and more people vaccinated and to prevent the fourth wave in December. So Jacqui Reed is an employment lawyer at the Herbert Smith Freehills, and she joins us now for more on this. Jacqui, good to have you, and thank you so much for your time. I mean, we need some clarity, well, at least businesses, employers as well as employees, on what perhaps you think should be done here. But before we get into that, why do you think more and more employers are actually quite hesitant to actually implement mandatory vaccinations at their workplace?
Thank you very much for having me. We think that there is a hesitancy on the part of employers because we have the constitutional rights to bodily integrity, to freedom of religion, to freedom of belief and opinion. And we also have the concept of unfair discrimination in our law. And many employers, we are finding, are hesitant to implement the mandatory vaccination policy because of these possible pushback scenarios that exist in our law. So the direction on occupational health and safety in certain workplaces does permit employers to implement a mandatory vaccination policy in the workplace, provided extensive consultation is undergone between the employer and the various stakeholders in the employment relationship, including health and safety committees, health and safety representatives, employees, and trade unions. There also appears, and you would be familiar with this from a news perspective, the trade unions seem to be of the view that mandatory vaccinations are not appropriate. There are also certain political parties that have indicated that mandatory vaccinations would not be appropriate. It's not clear in relation to the political parties whether or not they're referring to a government-mandated vaccine policy or whether they're referring to workplace policies in that regard. But certainly the trade unions have said that they do not support mandatory vaccinations in the workplace. They do support vaccinations, just not mandatory vaccinations.
Yeah. So that's the perspective of the political parties as well as trade unions. But on the other hand, we're seeing business, or at least some of them, taking quite a leap in faith and just a step here. When we're looking at Discovery Health, for example, being the first large South African employer to actually introduce mandatory vaccinations within their business, but also Busa coming on the other hand saying they intend to approach the High Court, particularly for that reason, to provide certainty, right, to actually approach the High Court for a declarator, Jacqui, in order to provide certainty and give employees confidence that they're actually on the right side of the law. Do you think this would give some ease and, it will make their jobs a lot more easier, as employers should, of course, that declarator be provided?
I think that it would provide employers with more comfort in relation to this issue. But the issue is that the direction does permit employers to implement a mandatory vaccination policy. The issue then arises as to whether or not an employee's constitutional rights are being infringed as a result of being required to comply with that policy. And our view is that if you consider the fact that all the rights that are ones that may be infringed, such as bodily integrity, freedom to exercise your religion, belief or opinion, those are rights that are not that are capable of limitation. So they're not entirely protected. So the rights that are entirely protected are the right to life and the right to human dignity. But the right to bodily integrity, for example, is something that can be limited. And Section 36 of our Constitution permits that right to be limited in circumstances where it's appropriate in an open and democratic society, taking into account relevant factors, as I've set out, the nature of the rights, the purpose of the limitation, and so on. And we're of the view that if you consider the effect of the pandemic on people's lives, if you consider the fact that employers are obliged in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and or the Mine Health and Safety Act to provide a working environment that is both safe and healthy for their employees. In those circumstances, we're of the view that mandatory vaccinations in the workplace would not infringe upon those rights and would not constitute unfair discrimination in the
All
workplace.
right. Well, I suppose it's something there for employees to also consider. But Jacqui, I appreciate you talking to us this morning. Jacqui Reed, thank you so much for your time.